Very good evening. Thank you for joining us on Faye Souza. This is an interesting development, of course, of the cabinet reshuffle. Everyone's talking about it. But we're just going to try and attempt to understand what's really going on and why the Prime Minister decided to conduct this massive shuffle of his cabinet. Let me just take you through the big changes, right? So to begin with, the resignations that surprised people today: Health Minister Vardhan, IT Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad, Environment Minister Prakash, Javadekar, Education Minister, Labour Minister, all resigned. This came as a surprise because Dr. Harshvardhan, Ravi Shankar Prasad, and Prakash Javadekar are veterans really of the party. Outside of them, I believe that only maybe Mr. Rajnath Singh is the last veteran left right now in the party. 43 new members were sworn in, including Jyotiraditya, Scindia, Kiren, Rijiju, Anurag, Thakur, Meenakshi, Lekhi, Bhupender, Yadav, Shobha, Karandlaje, and many others. And we'll go through some of those names. Joining us right now to help us understand what is going on is Ms. Radhika Ramaseshan. She's a senior journalist, someone I respect greatly. Also, at a halfway mark of our conversation, Mr. Sharat Pradhan will also join us. Let me just bring in Radhika ji. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Do you think that this is a reaction to the fact that people were unhappy with the handling of COVID, or is there something else to it?
Yeah, definitely. I think the pandemic is a very big theme when you look at the overall picture. But, there are other issues as well, Faye. The economy is in a very, very bad way, probably the lowest in the last several years, because I think the first 4 years they were able to ride on the legacy of the UPA government. And after that, it's been a downslide. So economy is definitely one. Then, like it or not, human rights issues, the latest being the death in custody of Father Stans for me. I mean, these have had international reverberations. And however much the government says that, we don't care for what, global attention or criticism, somewhere it stings, definitely. Then you had confrontations with Twitter, social media giants. None of this has really enhanced the stature of this government, so to speak. Although they may have implemented their core agenda and satisfied their core bhakts, but there are a lot of extraneous considerations that have also come into play. Now, the pandemic has brought everything into the foreground. There is a sense that this government is not hands-on. The right hand doesn't know what the left is doing, literally. And that it needed a fresh lick of paint. I mean, you have listed some of the veterans. There is also Nitin Gadkari and, of course, Rajnath Singh. I mean, these are two, the last veterans standing, so to speak. So there was a sense that a fresh coat of paint was necessary. And so how do you do it? So you induct young faces who don't necessarily come with too much baggage. And then the second component is, of course, the social balancing, which is all too important when you have 5 states going to elections, and especially Uttar Pradesh, the mother of all elections. You're going to see the mother of all elections in Uttar Pradesh. So you do the social balancing. So I was just wrapping my head around it. The cabinet ministers are kind of professionals, whether you take Hardeep Puri, R.K. Singh, the power minister, a former bureaucrat. I wouldn't put Jyotiraditya, Scindia in that category.
But I'd like to break this down and go piece by piece. And first take a look at, like you said, the resignations. So if we say that, Ravi Shankar Prasad's locking horns with Twitter on a regular basis has actually reached a point where it's sending the wrong message from the government, does that mean that the new IT, minister will not lock horns with Twitter, or will be doing it in a different way? Because that's obviously government policy that might not change when,
exactly.
When one.
Exactly. It's a bit more complex than what appears, because I don't think Ravi Shankar Prasad would have exceeded his brief or carried things to such an extent, or maybe he was given a particular brief which was a little restrictive, and he went overboard. I mean, that some of them also have the tendency to do that, to exaggerate their jurisdiction and take it too far. I suspect that's probably what happened in Ravi Shankar Prasad's case, an overreach, so to speak. And that sent very negative signals, not only to the international, not only internationally, but to the domestic community. I mean, WhatsApp and Twitter are used across castes, across classes. I mean, they've sort of bridged the economic social divide, so to speak. So if you are going to clamp down or set up alternative mediums like Coup, it's not going to go down well with vast sections. I mean, if you go to, say, villages in Uttar Pradesh, mobile phones are used by everybody. And everyone has a WhatsApp, and this has been there for years, ever since WhatsApp came. It's not a new thing that people have embraced. So I think Ravi Shankar Prasad exceeded his brief. That must have caused some embarrassment to the top leadership. So I think he had to be. They had to bring in.
Let's talk about Dr. Harshvardhan. Right? The changing of a health minister in the middle of a pandemic, when incidentally the government has constantly defended his handling, but maybe not defending him personally, but defended the government's own handling of the pandemic, suggesting that they didn't see any sort of shortcoming. So if there was no shortcoming, why did they change the key minister in the middle of a pandemic? And it was always, said that since he was at some point a member of the WHO, since he is a medical doctor himself, he's uniquely qualified to handle this crisis. And now we've seen him being changed, and we don't know who the replacement is. What messaging is that?
Yeah. Now, Harshvardhan's case, you're absolutely right. He's part of a much larger ecosystem that was managing the pandemic. There is Dr. V.K. Paul and a host of others. I mean, V.K. Paul's name comes to mind. Now, again, as in the case of Ravi Shankar Prasad, and knowing how this system works, no minister acts unilaterally. I mean, that's a thing for sure. They take their directions absolutely from the top. Yes. One doesn't even know what is the kind of mandate they exercise, what is the jurisdiction they have. It's not very clear, because everything seems to be so excessively centralized in this government. Now, on the other hand, people have taken the example of Shivraj Patil during 2611. Again, Shivraj Patil, it's probably a bit unfair to have singled him out, although he was the home minister. But in the end, every government wants to fix accountability. It was done much more scrupulously and more promptly in the good old days. I mean, whenever there was a rail accident, the railway minister would put in his papers and so on. Or, you even had defense ministers quitting in the past, like Krishna Menon did after 62. So therefore, I think it's important for any government also to fix accountability. Now, are you going to sack everybody in the system? That's not feasible. So you do have a fifth pole guy, you identify a pole guy, and there was a perception that Harshvardhan should have gone earlier itself when the government was in deep crisis. April and May. I mean, they were the worst months that the country has gone through so far. So, and Harshvardhan was rarely surfaced. I mean, he surfaced once in a way, and he gave some very controversial statements, which really made no sense at all. So I think, in a sense, that Harshvardhan's departure was coming. One felt it. And
but forgive me for interrupting you. Does this mean the government is acknowledging failing and handling of COVID?
Yeah, of course, the government is acknowledging handling of the pandemic. And to come back to the beginning, Modi has carried out this whole exercise from a position of some vulnerability. He is still strong. I don't want to take that away from him, but there have been setbacks, there have been reversals in the past. I mean, the West Bengal defeat, the pandemic, the mismanagement, the sagging economy. I mean, he is today not in the position that he was in 2019. So he's carried it, the whole exercise from a position of relative vulnerability, and the departure of Vardhan is a reflection of the is an admission that the pandemic has been handled badly, and we would not like to repeat the crisis. We would not like to repeat things if there is a crisis, which seems like it's looming large on the horizon. Of course, everything depends on who is Harshvardhan's successor, whether he or she is given the kind of freedom that is needed for a minister to do things the way he or she envisions. Probably, if Harshvardhan was given more latitude, he may just have got on top of the situation, or may not have allowed things to deteriorate. So it's, yeah.
So if I look at now the list of the very senior, core cabinet ministers who resigned, you've got education, you've got labor, and you've got health. Now, these are also three key areas that suffered in the last 2 years. And these are areas, for example, that have come up in court, that the Supreme Court has pulled up the government on, High Courts have pulled up governments on. What's happening with education? What's happening with, with migrant labor? What's happening with health? Is this a way of the government saying, we know that this is, there's a problem, but we're going to fix it. So it sort of breaks the idea that this government is not hands-on and it's not reacting to what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, you've taken the example of education. First you had Smriti Irani, and the HRD minister. She left in very controversial circumstances after Rohit Vemula's suicide and everything that followed thereafter. Then you had Prakash Javadekar, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. Then Ramesh Pokhriyal was brought in. Now, the problem with HRD is this is one ministry that is ripe for RSS's active intervention. The RSS cherishes certain ministries, and education, culture, these are some of the ministries that seem very close to its heart. Now, Nishank was chosen. Apparently, he was not the Prime Minister's first choice. He was chosen only because of pressure from the RSS. Now, if you bring in somebody from the RSS, he is going to fulfill the RSS's agenda, which clashes with the expectations from governance, because ideology is fine. Every party pursues a certain ideology. Every party does carry out an agenda based on its ideology. But it's the question of tempering things, And I think when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, Mr. Modi himself managed to strike a balance between ideology and the compulsions of governance quite ably. I mean, it brought him in confrontation with the VHP and the Bharati Kisan Sangh, both of which are affiliates of the RSS. Now, in the case of Nishank, I suspect that he was just there to pursue the RSS's objectives. And that clearly clashed with with the expectations of education in a secular society, which we still are.
But let's also, talk about the people who've been inducted into cabinet at this point. Now, my first question when I saw the number 43 is that maximum government at this point? Because we were promised that government will come down, governance will be a more efficient mode of government. This doesn't seem efficient. 43 new ministers seems like a lot.
Yes, and you have a whole lot of MOSs,
Yes.
Yeah, a whole lot of them, which I suspect was done purely to patronize representatives from certain castes and communities, keeping in mind the elections that are coming. So I don't think the MOSs are going to play a very crucial role. We just have to look at the cabinet ministers. Now, we were told that there will be lateral entrants, and Dr. Devi Shetty and KV Kamat's names were actively doing the rounds for quite some time. That has not happened. Not a single lateral entrant has been taken. However, there are professionals. I mean, I guess you could consider Hardeep Puri or R.K. Singh, both of whom have been promoted. So these are the professionals, handful of professionals that this cabinet has. Now, how is it going to sort of, is it a new look cabinet? I'm not very sure. There are some new elements, of course, but I think it's more of the old. And as you said, it's maximum government.
So a couple of things I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, I looked at the list a little bit. We were told by a lot of shouty media channels last night saying more minority representatives will be inducted. I don't see a single minority name. There are some Dalit names, there are more women, but I don't see a single minority name. So the BJP has stuck to its guns on that one.
Absolutely, except John Barla from West Bengal, tribal Christian. Otherwise, yes, you're right. Even, I mean, the name of Syed Islam was doing the rounds until this morning, but they haven't inducted him. He wasn't inducted. So, yes, I mean, if you're talking about representation, about social equity, it is missing. Geographical representation, yes, I mean, they've fairly taken care, though I will come to it later. But social representation of minorities, no. I myself was surprised when that was being talked up last night. I said,
Yes.
Knowing the BJP, they are not going to do that. What, however, Mr. Modi has done is giving the allies a little more space than they got in the past, having lost all his allies except Ramdas Athavale of the RPI. I mean, in recent times, of course, the JDU was there. JDU was mighty upset in the past because they demanded a proportional representation and they didn't get it. I think just one person has been sworn in as cabinet minister, but he's a good choice, RCP Singh, because he's a former IAS officer who worked in the railway ministry under Nitish Kumar. So I guess we would know the ropes of the job. And if they're going to hive off take away the railway ministry from Piyush Goyal and leave him with commerce, then RCP Singh would be a good choice because having worked in the ministry.
So there's one person I want to talk a little bit about, so our audience will know a little bit now. People like you will know of this individual, but normal Indians don't know of Bhupender Yadav, who is an inside man of the BJP. He is apparently sort of a right-hand man to Home Minister Amit Shah, and now he's been sworn in as cabinet minister. Could you tell us a little bit more about Mr. Yadav and why he's interesting at this point?
Yeah, Mr. Yadav started off as someone who was close to LK Advani. He planned the very last yatra that Advani ji undertook before the 2009 elections. And after that, he's been a key person in the organization. First, he was a national secretary, and then he was elevated as general secretary, which is a very key post. After the president, it's the general secretary who is important in the BJP. And he got close to Arun Jaitley, and Arun Jaitley mentored him, so to speak, in the organization. Arun Jaitley was a very good organizational hand, and he mentored, and so Bhupender Yadav was probably mentored by the best in the business. He was allotted important states like Uttar Pradesh. I even saw him in the Gujarat elections. And, so he has a way of relating to the state leaders without being condescending. I think Bhupender Yadav's greatest asset is that he's not aggressive, he's not belligerent, he keeps calm, and he listens to everybody, tries not to play factional politics, which is important for an organization person. And he oversaw the successful conduct of some elections, which is not to give credit, not to credit him entirely with the victories, but he did play a role in some of the elections, notably Bihar. He kept the alliance with Nitish. And in between, they broke off, of course, and then they got back again. Then he managed a very difficult Gujarat election in 20.
So do you see it interesting that he's been inducted into cabinet at a time when there are key elections coming up in the next few months? Is he going to, I mean, he'd obviously not have the time to look at those campaigns as closely, or will he?
I don't think, because they've got their Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand apparatuses in order, and he doesn't figure anywhere. Bhupender Yadav was never really involved in Uttar Pradesh. Amit Shah has his own men over there. So in the next organizational reshuffle, we'll have to see who is put in charge of Uttar Pradesh. But Bhupender Yadav is now in the cabinet, and the BJP adheres quite strictly to the one person, one post norm. So informally, he may get involved in the organization if he's asked to, but I think he will switch to his brief of being a cabinet minister.
So the other question that's coming from Raghunathan, he's saying that, if the reshuffle clearly shows the failures in health, IT, education and environment, what about the biggest failure in the finance ministry? Is this a lack of acknowledgement that, hey, everything's okay with the economy, we don't need to make changes right now?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, even I sort of expected, the axe to fall on the finance minister. That didn't quite happen. So yes, I think, if the finance minister was touched, it would have entailed a whole new round robin kind of arrangement, and probably they didn't find a replacement. And they could have brought a lateral entrant, but knowing the BJP and the RSS, they're very suspicious of outsiders. I mean, Jaishankar is really an exception. Hardeep Puri also did a longish stint in the party before he was inducted in the ministry. So given their innate suspicion of outsiders and lateral entrants, it is difficult to bring in one. And in the case of Nirmala, she is there because of the Tina factor. I think that it's as simple as that. Are you going to acknowledge that the economy is in a bad way? Well, we'll have to wait and see. And in this case, I think it is a PMO which is kind of handling finance and economics primarily. That is what I'm given to understand. So let us see what they do with it.
Where do you think Jyotiraditya Scindia is going to wind up, in which office? And when will we know who has got what ministry and what berth?
Yeah, the portfolio should come by tonight. I think by usually around midnight. I mean, in these sort of exercises in the past, the announcements come close to midnight. So we'll have to wait. Now, Jyotiraditya Scindia is going to get an important portfolio. He's not going to settle for peanuts. That's for sure. I mean, either commerce or HRD, possibly health. Who knows? Because health is now a hotshot ministry. I mean, we haven't seen the last of the pandemic. It is lingering on. So what they would ideally want is not someone with medical knowledge and expertise, but someone who can administratively look after the ministry and, work with the larger ecosystem and deliver results. So Jyotiraditya Scindia can fit in anywhere.
So here's the actual question, Radhika ji, that I want to ask you. We've had this whole shuffle. You said in the beginning that this is a top-down sort of power-concentrated government where the PMO and the HMO, which is the Prime Minister's office, Home Minister's office, actually through their tentacles control almost everything. So with this whole shuffle that has happened, is anything likely to change? Can we expect something different from the Education Ministry or from the Health Ministry or anybody else if it's actually being controlled by the same people?
Now that it's being made out that performance was the yardstick, and I'm not very sure about that, because I think it's a lot more complex than just saying that someone has underperformed or somebody has performed well. It's not, I mean, you rightly took the example of the finance ministry. So now what are the expectations? Like I said in the beginning, it just depends on the leeway that these ministers get, and knowing how excessively centralized authority is in this government, the ones at the top are not going to change overnight. I mean, the orders will come from the top. They will be routed through the PMO. There will be sort of checks and balances exercised by those at the top. So, I mean, and in these circumstances, even if you assume that Jyotiraditya is super efficient, is he going to have the latitude to deliver? Is he going to get some kind of freedom? That is the big question. Unless Modi and Amit Shah change their way of working, I don't see that happening.
Which we don't see that happening. And also, there is the question, and then now that Mr. Sharat Pradhan has joined us as well, there is the question of the upcoming elections. And I wondered if the senior gentlemen who've been freed up now from cabinet, which is Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad and Mr. Prakash Javadekar, are actually going to be employed in electioneering for the next 1 year planning, because Gujarat is up, Uttar Pradesh is key to them. Mr. Sharat Pradhan, how are you reading the shuffling of the cabinet? What was it done for?
I think it only reflects the ultimately it's the whims of the Prime Minister, because who nobody can deny that this government is just a one-man show, and to claim that these decisions have been taken on merit and on the basis of performance of these ministers, it is only laughable. Because if it were the performance, then why is the government not taking any action against, or why doesn't Nirmala Sitharaman not figure in the list of those who have been dropped? After all, the economy has gone to dogs in this country. Look at the foreign policy. Today, we are not friends with any of our neighbors, and Jaishankar remains there. So obviously, performance is to claim that it is the appointments, the people have been dropped because of their performance or their poor performance. It is unbelievable. Look at Ravi Shankar Prasad. I think he's been quite an astute minister, and he's done a good job. And this is the way he's being rewarded. And even the BJP spokesman, I was on some other channel.
Mr. Pradhan, we were talking about Ravi Shankar Prasad's very public spat with Twitter India.
That is the reason.
Well handled.
Then they shouldn't say that he's a fantastic. This is what the BJP spokespersons are saying, that he's a great guy. He's done a great job. Then this is the way BJP rewards their great people. Javadekar. Now, what did Javadekar do? For that matter, Harshvardhan. I mean, simple thing. He's been made a scapegoat for the decisions that obviously he's not responsible for being taken. I mean, after all, decisions on COVID, major decisions, whether it is to do with vaccines, whether it is, have been taken by the Prime Minister himself. And if there's gross mismanagement of the COVID, and because of which, in the second wave, what happened, we all know, we don't have to repeat that. A lot of chief ministers are responsible for it.
No, Sharat, if I can just intervene, in Ravi Shankar Prasad's case, I think that whole spat, very public and, very bellicose kind of spat with Twitter and WhatsApp and things was becoming very uncomfortable. He must have been given a brief. I agree with you.
He couldn't have done it on his own.
Yeah, but I think, like I told Faye before you joined, that he exceeded his brief. It was very typical of Ravi Shankar's way of working. As for Prakash Javadekar, individually, he has very good relations with the media. I mean, you pick up the phone, you talk to him, he'll be amicable and so on. But it is the media policies. I mean, look at our ranking among the countries with, a poor sort of press censorship and press freedom index. We are low down with the Latin American countries. I never thought that we would,
Radhika ji, also the Prime Minister being named among the predators of press freedom by reporters.
Precisely, I was coming to that.
Yeah.
But is this supposed to send the message that it was Mr. Javadekar? I mean, we all know what was happening really, but is this meant to send the message that the bad press freedom index rating was Mr. Javdekar's doing, and it will be better and different now, Radhika ji? Is that the
I don't think there's going to be a change of heart. I mean, let me assure you. In fact, closer to 2024, the crackdown is going to get even more serious. The crackdown on the media, because they would want their own puppets in the media. They wouldn't want dissenting voices. They wouldn't want criticisms. Nothing. I mean, they're basically an intolerant lot. Now, why has he been punished? I mean, that is the question. Yeah. He's not such a great organizational hand that he's going to be, an asset in the organization. He was in charge of the Rajasthan elections, the last Rajasthan elections, which the BJP lost. He couldn't contain the dissensions within the Rajasthan BJP. His record was not that great. I mean, probably Ravi Shankar is a savvier organizational person. So why was Javadekar dropped? I mean, there is another.
The other question that has come in for either of you, whoever wants to answer this, Mohit says we need more sincere ministers like Mr. Gadkari. They should be given more freedom to do things. Now, this is obviously, and we talked about this, which is Mr. Rajnath Singh and Mr. Gadkari. You said are the only veterans left from the Sushma Swaraj Jaitley class of the BJP, right? Because now even the others have been moved out. But what are they doing really? Mr. Rajnath Singh has also been fairly quiet. Mr. Nitin Gadkari, which as journalists we knew was fairly fond of talking to media on camera, giving interviews. He liked to talk about his ministry. He liked to talk about the work he's doing. He's been absolutely quiet as well. So are they, do we understand this as them being given a free hand to run their ministries, or their diminishing value? Mr. Pradhan, how do you read it?
Well, I can't imagine that, because ultimately, we all know that if Mr. Modi is just trying to build a facade, that by sending to send a message that, well, this guy was not working according to my in the direction, and the government's policy is not like that. We have no intention of clamping down on the media. But the fact remains that media, they just want, as commonly called, the Godi media. Otherwise, they don't want the media. It is a regime where it's complete. It's a despotic regime. So where is the room for media? And if Ravi Shankar Prasad or a Javadekar has taken any action, I can't imagine that they could have done anything on their own. Maybe they've overstepped the brief, but Javadekar couldn't have done what they have done to the media and earned this kind of a reputation. Yeah. As you rightly pointed out, Mr. Modi has been pointedly described as the biggest predator of the media. The story is out today only, and and one has experienced, and now they are out to even throttle the social media by doing all kinds of things. So where is the room? It is only a convenient way to put the blame, pass the buck to somebody else, and which is what they have done in the case of Harshvardhan. Harshvardhan is rated as a good minister. Now, when you are not, I mean, you mean to say all the vaccination policy was decided by poor Harshvardhan? Can you imagine that? Can anybody even remotely believe that?
But the only thing we knew that Dr. Harshvardhan did of his own accord was promote Coronil when it was being launched by Mr. Ramdev of Patanjali, but also Nitin Gadkari was also on that stage at that point. That doesn't justify.
No, that doesn't justify, because obviously the Ramdev is as close to their boss, and if they're prop up Ramdev, it is not only it's also to make Mr. Modi happy.
Exactly. So, yeah. In 2013, Modi, in fact, attended a big function in Ramdev's ashram, which I covered. And the buzz at that time was that he's cultivating Ramdev and Sri Ravi and, these other new age religious guys in order to fix the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, because he found them too much of a thing on his back. So Ramdev has been patronized by this regime, and it's not just by Harshvardhan. Harshvardhan probably picked up the signal and decided to praise
precisely
Ramdev, just to keep.
So let me ask the next question, which is, how much room has there been made in this list of new inductees, in the rookies, for the allies? Now, is there room here for someone from the LJP to replace Ramvilas Paswan? Who are the other allies who have been kept happy with an eye on the elections to come? Radhika ji?
Yeah, there is Apna Dal, Anurag Patel, who was a minister in the earlier regime, but she was not taken the second time round. Now that the UP elections are coming and she decided to sulk a bit, she's been inducted in the ministry. Of course, the JDU, which was left hanging all this while, they've got one berth, although Nitish Kumar wanted more than one berth. So these are the two allies that I see who have been given some kind of a place in this reshuffle. I don't see anyone else. I mean, the Haryana ally doesn't have an MP. Otherwise, they might have taken him. And of course, Ramvilas Paswan's party, which I'm sure Nitish is not very happy about. So they put the Ramvilas Paswan's party as well as the JDU on a par by just giving one ministry to
one each. Mr. Pradhan, anything interesting here from the point of view of the UP elections?
Well, they tried to bring in, in continuation of what Radhika said, in Uttar Pradesh, one was expecting that they would, to placate the certain OBC caste, they would, and their parties, there are smaller parties like the Nishad party and the party of Rajbhars, but neither of them have been taken in. into the cabinet. One was expecting that they would probably, but at the same time, what they have done is to placate those communities. They have picked up people from within the BJP belonging to those particular castes. That's the reason you find most of them are from the OBCs. And the message that had been going that Yogi Adityanath is very heavily tilted towards upper caste Thakurs. They have tried to, and Keshav Maurya was quite cut up with this whole system. So, and Keshav Maurya being a strong OBC. So that's the reason they have picked up to balance out things. So, of course, with the eye on the UP elections, but how much is going to work? Because I feel that probably the Brahmins are quite cut up with the Yogi's style of working and this pro-Thakur tilt. And and Brahmins were expecting a better representation in the cabinet from UP this time. They have probably there's only one out of the 7. There is only one Brahmin, that's Ajay Mishra, who's known to be a good has been a good parliamentarian from Lakhimpur. And but that is obviously not the idea. Good people, it's not the merit that works. It is the caste combination, the regional affiliations. All these things count much more than a merit.
So, so let me now ask you this: if we're looking at and somebody else brought this up again, and we had Radhika ji already answered it, but Mr. Pradhan, Preeti Girl asked, are there any hopes of a better management of the third wave of COVID because of this shutdown?
No, there can be only claims, because when with the kind of things that happened at the end of the second wave, people dying for want of oxygen, people not finding place to burn their dead, people just immersing their bodies in the rivers or burying them in the banks of the rivers. You can imagine, and then the Chief Minister and the Prime Minister have the cheek to announce that what a wonderful management they have done of the COVID second wave, and they are well equipped, they're already well equipped to deal with the third wave. So, what happens on paper is far different from, I don't see, they have been, if we just go by their claims, then they have done an incredible job of both the first and the second wave. The first wave, when it came on the, on its own, it was fading away. Then they said, see what a wonderful, they managed to get certificates from WHO. They got some kind of a letter from John Hopkins, which was eventually denied. That John Hopkins said, we have nothing to do with that. So the problem here is of what they put up in the public domain, the government puts up, and what is the reality. So it's the difference between.
So one person we have not talked about is Anurag Thakur, 4-time Lok Sabha MP, served as Minister of State, Junior Minister of Finance. Also, we must note here Goli Maru Salongo of that fame as well. Has now been sworn into cabinet. What is he likely to get? Radhika ji, what do you think Anurag Thakur is likely to be placed?
Well, he's been actively involved in cricket and, cricket power politics. I mean, he's become very close to Jai Shah. He was inducted into cricket politics by Arun Jaitley. Now, he's become very close to Jai Shah. Modi, instantly, his father, Prem Dhumal, was very close to Modi when Modi was the General Secretary of Himachal Pradesh and Dhumal was the Chief Minister. Then I don't know what happened. I mean, because Dhumal was not made the Chief Minister again. In fact, he lost his seat and they brought a younger person. Now, if Anurag Thakur has ambitions in Himachal Pradesh, those are not going to be easily realized because they have a young Chief Minister there, Jairam Thakur, who's supposed to be part of the new generation. So Anurag Thakur is going to be confined to national politics. But I think he's kind of now, he's hit the big times. I mean, I would say cabinet minister at a fairly young age. So
also the other question is Mr. Sonowal, who was the former Chief Minister of Assam. Where is we likely to see him? Because he was also involved very closely in sports. He at one point held independent charge of the sports ministry within the cabinet as well. Right. Do you see him being placed somewhere interesting?
They would give him some kind of a weighty portfolio. I don't know if he will get back sports or he could be placed somewhere else because, I mean, there are lots of vacancies. But on Sonowal, I mean, my only question is, if they think that he was not good enough to be repeated as the Assam Chief Minister, is he good enough for a cabinet post? I mean, the buzz from Guwahati during the elections was, if they had fought it directly under Sonowal's leadership, they might not have done well because he was extremely unpopular. Now, I didn't travel to Assam, so I wouldn't know, but that was what I heard from friends and journalists in Guwahati. So, but then he's being pacified because he's a tribal leader. They have to look after the tribal constituents in Assam or in the Northeast. I mean, if you like. So I think that is the reason for bringing in Sonowal. If you notice this, I'll just quickly add, Sushil Modi has not got a berth.
I was just going to ask you.
Contrary to expectations, in fact, he was supposed to be replacing Nirmala Sitharaman according to the grapevine at one point. But anyone who's familiar with the BJP history and the equation between Modi and Nitish Kumar will know that Sushil Modi didn't stand a chance at all. He's very close to Nitish Kumar. He continues to be close to Nitish Kumar, a confidant. So he doesn't have Mr. Modi's trust at all, given Mr. Modi's acrimonious relations with Nitish in the past. Yeah.
Right. Mr. Pradhan, do you want to weigh in on Sushil Modi and why he didn't find himself, and also I thought it was very interesting that there was a lot of press coverage on, okay, Jyotiraditya has got a call. Okay, now he's leaving. Like, it was a surprise even to these people, whether or not they were going to get a call.
So, absolutely, what Radhika has pointed out, I mean, this trust deficit. And if you have, Modi has the trust deficit, then there's no chance. But there are a couple of other people who were being, they were rumored to be called to Delhi. One was Rita Bhaguna Joshi.
Yes.
And she switched from Congress to BJP, and so far she has got nothing. It's been 3 years, 4 years. Likewise, there was another name that was coming up. Radhika would probably agree with me. It was Varun Gandhi. And
yes.
Varun Gandhi of late, and the kind of articles that he is quite a prolific writer. He keeps writing in all these papers, and his articles were quite heavily tilted for Modi, which earlier, about a year back, it wasn't like that. He was not very complimentary. So now considering that, but he's nowhere in the scene. And maybe because of the surname, they don't like the Gandhi factor is going against them now, because the mother was already sidelined. So, and these were two names from Uttar Pradesh, which were probably, because I think with election in mind, there was a time when Varun Gandhi used to be considered as a potential UP chief minister for the BJP. And so these surprises, as I said in the beginning, since it is a one-man show, it is Modi's whims which ultimately decide everything. It is nothing else.
So you're saying this is image management?
This is image management.
All right, so we're going to leave it there. I want to thank both of you for giving us time this evening and answering our questions, helping us understand what is going on when we look at it from the outside, as people who are not, into the political grapevine. For our viewers, remember the news is up at 9 o'clock, where we give you all of the information without any drama at all. 10 minutes of news at 9 p.m. We call it Just the News. Share it with friends and family. Radhika ji and Sharat ji, thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you.